Hey guys, Kate here of Burn One. We're doing a little discussion video, I guess, to really talk about car design in Weiss and essentially something that comes up, at least for me. I don't know if anyone else really thinks about this or talks about this, about like certain card effects that are on finishers. So, for example, what made me think about this more again recently is the Sakura effect on this card that was spoiled for Zombieland Saga that comes out this November. For obviously people who don't know what this card is or can't read Japanese, the card effect is when it comes into play, it heals one, which is like pretty standard. The climax combo, when this card attacks, if you have the climax, which we don't know what the climax is yet, um, on the board, and you have another Saga traded character, you can pay cost, which is pay one, discard one, and if you do, you burn your opponent for one. And then if that is canceled, that burn one for is canceled, then your opponent takes 2 damage. You get to burn them for 2. And then if that is also canceled, then you take the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck and put them straight to clock. So when you first read this effect, you get really, really hype and you're like, this is a hilarious effect. This is a really funny finisher. It possibly could be the finisher people end up playing in this set just because of how ridiculously fun it can be. And I'm not sure if it's going to be the best finisher, but it's definitely a spicy one. But more often than not, this card is literally on attack, pay one, ditch one, burn one, and then sometimes it's a burn two. But like the send 3 to clock, the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck to clock is basically almost never going to happen, right? Unless your opponent is like really unlucky or super compressed, right? Because more often than not, this card's just straight up a pay one, ditch one, burn one, which is sometimes completely reasonable and fine, as a finisher. My issue that comes up here is like, yes, when you read this effect, yes, the person playing the effect is going to have so much fun playing this effect because they get to have the basically kind of like the gamble or the hype of like, oh my god, my opponent canceled on one. Now I get to do this too, and if that goes through, I get 3 guaranteed damage for no reason, or not no reason essentially, but for this effect, which is like really exciting in itself. But when you flip this around, I think this type of effect is a super feels bad effect for your opponent because in a way there's no real way to play around this effect. And the fact that they got punished for the order of cards in their deck just happened to be in a way that they cancel on one, they cancel the burnt 2, and then they just take 3 straight afterwards that's uncancelable. Feels horrible because you have no way to play no real way to like do anything about this at all. So even though I think playing this effect could be really, really fun, and there's going to be a lot of people who are going to have fun playing this effect, I definitely am because I'm definitely picking up this set just so I can play this level 3. I think designs like this is too feels bad for your opponent. I think effects that completely matter on opponent's order of like a randomized pile of cards. You can have like the spectrum of like I accidentally canceled twice and now I'm taking 3 damage because I was just like had a good ratio or something. I think that's personally, I think making your opponent feel bad that way makes this like really unfun to play against, period, right? Because like I said, you don't really have any tools to like really mitigate like this really going off. At least like something like being able to stack a card on top of your deck to make sure the burn one goes through instead of like randomly you end up taking 2 and then canceling and then taking 3 straight. I think that feels really bad for your opponent. So people will get frustrated and mad at the game because they had no real control over this, right? But I love to see effects like this, but I just wish there were ways to like make this less feels baddie, I guess, for your opponent to lose to. And I'm not really sure how you would go about that way, but I just feel like this is like kind of bad game. I don't want to say game design or bad card design, but when it comes to finishers, I think you need to be a little bit more careful about how you make these RNG effects play out in the game so your opponent doesn't feel as bad. So like for example, like if a Musashi, like you get a burn on attack and then go for the swing and they have the Musashi effect on a card, that at least doesn't feel as bad because there is a little bit randomness obviously to it. But I feel like you don't really feel as bad losing to that type of randomness. Whereas this type of randomness that like you got 2 cancels and then suddenly you're just taking 3 plus an attack still, just feels bad for people, right? Um, a card like this that like before I talked about a lot too, like the Sakura, was the Megumin Burn 5 card that's often used in the Konosuba build and still is used to this day. That card, like when people think Burn 5, most of the time everyone just assumes it's a cancel because honestly, at that late of the stage of the game, like if you're burning for 5, you generally don't have, or I don't want to say don't have, but like you're generally set up in a way that a burn for 5 should never go through almost, right? You're usually 1 in 3, sometimes 1 in 4. So generally the odds are that you're going to cancel a burn for 5, right? And more, I feel like more often than not, the burn for 5 usually gets canceled, right? But taking that 5 when you're in a good compressed state just feels horrible, right? When you lose to that effect, obviously, you when you win with this effect, you're like, hell yeah, I burned for 5, get fucking crushed, nerd, or whatever you want to say, right? Like, and then your opponent feels really crappy because they spent this time compressing, setting up their deck into a way that like technically a burn 5 should never go through, but then they end up eating the burn 5 anyway, and they lose because of that. It just feels horrible. Like mathematically, yeah, you just shouldn't feel like you should have lost to that, right? Because we're just flipping 5 random cards off the top of our deck, and every time we flip a non-climax, we're increasing the odds of the next card being a climax, right? So effects like this just feel really shitty, I think. And I wish there was more of a way where if you're going to have some of this random of canceling and stuff involved in your finisher to make it feel less horrible for your opponent to lose to it, kind of like how Musashi doesn't feel as bad, right? It just feels really scary. Whereas this is just like I did everything right and I was punished because the top 2 cards in my deck were climaxes. It just feels horrible. Um, yeah, I mean that's basically it. Like when people play against Mocha, no one ever really feels bad about Mocha because it's like you look at the top 2 cards. If there's 2 climaxes, you remove them, and then they have to go to the next 3 cards to see if that damage to go through. But I feel like this is a little bit different than that, right? I don't know. That's just my thoughts on it. Let me know what you guys think below. Do you think this finisher is going to be completely fine? I think this finisher is just going to be either the finisher of choice or there might be another finisher. I think recently they revealed another level 3 that's like burns twice for 1. Um, and also we don't know what the climax is on this. But this effect just like I said, I just think it feels bad in general. So let me know what you guys think below. What would you change, or if you think this shouldn't change and this is completely fine, let me know. I'm just wondering what you guys think about like these types of card designs that are obviously really fun when you first read the effect, but playing against this effect and randomly losing to like like just because two climaxes were on top of your deck just seems kind of crappy, you know. That's just what I thought about it. And I hope to hear from you guys too. Hopefully, we'll see you guys in the next video though. Later, guys.